Today's sweater says eat, drink, and be meowy, and has lots of little black cats all over it. Oh, and it has jingly bells and little ornaments. Hello and welcome to the channel. My name is Annalisa, and this is going to be the worst books of 2022. I wasn't sure if I wanted to make one of these, but I can't make my best books of the year yet because multiple of the books are published by HarperCollins, and I want to talk about them quite a bit during the video. And also when I was looking back, I realized that I do actually have enough irritation to do this video justice. So the first one, the one that is the only one with only 1 star because it had something I actually found to be harmful in it, is All About Passion by Stephanie Laurens. This is a historical romance book that I read in like November. There's a mentally ill character in the book. She's the only mentally ill character in the book, and she is the villain. That's very ableist, and then it threw in some eugenics by saying that mentally ill people shouldn't have kids, and even that anyone who has mental illness in their family shouldn't even have kids. It was really, really bad. Then in the 2-star category, we have Lore Olympus, which was extra disappointing because I was excited for it, but then when I actually read it, I didn't really like any of the characters. It wasn't nearly as fun or interesting as I had been led to believe by people talking about it. And then at the end of the first volume, I think it handles the way it did its trigger warnings for what happens at the end really badly. And from what I've heard about the power dynamics that are going to get set up in the next volume for the main romantic relationship, I don't think that consent is really handled all that well in this series. So I will not be picking up the next books. Then we have Fall in Love Again, which I read way back in February. And I'm pretty sure the reason I gave this 2 stars was that the characters were quite selfish and petty and immature, even though they were like in their 30s. And it's a second chance romance, which sometimes are good, sometimes are bad. In this case, I feel like they kind of should have stayed broken up. And also she tells one of the main characters tells their love interest that they're actually divorced when they're only separated. So there's some issues around that as well. Then we have The Midwife's Apprentice, which I've talked about in tags before as one that sounded like it'd be really good for me, taste-wise, but ended up not being because I really like midwives and historical fiction and middle grade. But this was just a very miserable book about the main character being miserable all the time because everyone is constantly being mean to her. Just all the time, and she could never catch a break. And sometimes the ending can pull together a book like that, but it very much didn't. It was one of the worst endings I've ever read, actually, other than the mentally ill person being the villain thing. And also it shows very early on that the midwife character, who the person is an apprentice to, is a kind of horrible person, and like most of the reason that I wanted to read it was because I like midwives and midwifery, and the midwife being a horrible person kind of wrecked that. Then we have Given, which is a dragon shifter romance, and the main hero character started out having some issues around understanding that despite the fact that he was the fated mate and could smell it on this human person, they didn't feel the same way, and he can't make them have a relationship with him. And like his dragon friends are like, you can't make her have a relationship with you. So clearly there was some background in how he was raised or in his friendships and in his culture that said consent is a thing. So he wasn't just uneducated, he just thought that since he felt the strong biological need, it meant that was the most important thing. And so I've heard in reviews that the character eventually repents of that, but for at least 100 pages of this book, he was being a massive jerk. And it just wasn't fun to read, and I don't want to have to wait a really long time for the payoff and to start shipping the romance because the character's a jerk. Like, if it had been like 50 pages, it would have been, you know, easier, but I feel like he was going to continue on this path for a while after the 100 pages, so I was just like, that's enough of that. Also, the main lady character was like this amazing person who had all these skills and was like trying to save, I think, her father from a disease by coming to this place to learn more about medicine, and she's a warrior and all sorts of things, and he was just not good enough for her. Then we have Practical Magic, which I thought I would really like because I really like the movie version. But it turns out the movie version changed a lot. Not only did it pick up the pace, it made all of the characters more likable. The main character especially is a lot more likable. Her sister's more likable. Her aunties are more likable. Her kids are more likable. Every close to main character is way less of a jerk in the movie version. And so a lot of what I love is the characters and also the atmosphere. And the atmosphere was also quite a bit different. It was a lot less cozy, a lot more dark in the book version. And I'm a very character-driven reader, so if everybody's a jerk, I don't really want to read the book. Then we have Shadow Wizard, which I haven't actually wrapped up yet because I just read it this month. But it is by Jeffe Kennedy, who I have really, really liked in the past. I've read a lot of books by her. They're fantasy romances that tend to be in series that tell a story, a longer, overarching, epic sort of fantasy story. In this one, it is the first of a new series, but it's taking off with the characters and the storyline of a previous series. So like, if you've read the previous series, you're invested in these characters and in this like place and plot and stuff that's happening. But it says in the title that it is a dark romance, which I should have thought that none of her other fantasy romances have that in the title. Maybe this is a problem for me. But I was just thinking, oh, it's part of this already established world, you know, it should be fine. It wasn't fine. So it starts off with these two characters running away through the woods to try to get away from the bad guys. And after taking a last stand to try to defend and be the rear guard for their other friends who are also escaping the bad guys. So you spend a few days with these people, getting to know them and their dynamic and getting invested in their relationship, and then they get captured, and then there's a whole lot of torture and horribleness till mostly the end of the book. Which I kind of draw a hard line at torture. Any book that involves any amount of that that's on page is like, nope. So I was skimming past everything because I was already invested in the characters. It doesn't actually give you a satisfying ending. You have to read the next book for that, which also says a dark fantasy romance in the title. So in order to find out what happens with these characters and get their happy ending, which maybe they won't even have a happy ending, I have to possibly read another bunch of horrible things happening. So yeah, I've never actually read something that was labeled as dark romance before. I've heard that a lot of things that are labeled dark romance have like bad power dynamics and like iffy consent and stuff like that. And like ultimately the relationship is not a good one and you want them to break up type of a thing. But it doesn't seem like that's how this story is gonna go. And it's very much not how the previous book set in this world and with like characters that are interlocked with these ones have been. So yeah, I'm not really sure what to expect. And I wasn't sure what to expect. So now I might read the next book, but anything else that says dark romance on it, I probably won't read. Because I don't really like dark anything. But especially romance, I want to not be dark. Even if it's a fantasy and has like a lot of like scary things in it, or like and has like a lot of bad guys or powerful bad guys in it. Like stuff by Grace Draven has a lot of powerful bad guys, and you're worried about how you're gonna conquer them, but you know you will, and you know that the characters aren't gonna get tortured during the story. So yeah, I'm not really mad. I'm just disappointed. It just was not the book for me, and I was expecting it to be the book for me. And yeah, like the other reviews and stuff don't talk about that. They're all about how sexy it was and how cool the characters are and how cool it is that they work out their trauma together, which that part is cool. But yeah, they don't really talk a lot about the dark element. But a lot of people are really not bothered by torture scenes. So yeah, I will have to keep in mind in the future that dark romance, dark fantasy romance is not for me. Although I've read dark fantasy, like Nettle and Bone is framed as dark fantasy, but only like the first 50 pages are dark, and then the rest is like a normal fantasy quest style thing. So labels are difficult, and I don't know how to predict whether I'm gonna like it, something that has dark, that says it's dark. But yeah, I'll talk more about Nettle and Bone in my wrap up, and I'll probably just glance over whatever this was called, Shadow Wizard, in my wrap up. So those are all the books that really upset me this year. And most of them were things that like I went in thinking I would like it, otherwise I wouldn't have tried it probably. I wasn't really iffy about many of them, whereas a lot of the books that I was feeling iffy about ended up being 4 or 5 stars, like Shadow and Nettle and Bone. I've learned a little about my taste as far as the dark romance is probably not something I want, but dark fantasy is. And I've been put off whole series so that I know not to read that series, but I don't think I've really learned anything from not liking these books, and that can be applied generally, other than that dark romance thing. So, but the fact that I had this few books that made me upset over reading 207 books so far this year is a pretty good sign. So 200 versus 7, that's like 3.5% of the books were upsetting, so that's not bad at all. And I'm willing to read some upsetting books, and I did DNF all except the first one and the last one that I mentioned, because the first one, the bad thing didn't really happen till, didn't know for sure it was happening till the end, and the other one I was too invested in. So most of them I DNF'd, so I didn't spend a whole lot of time being upset, so that's something good as well. I'm trying to end this on a positive note if you can't tell. So yeah, my DNFing score is not bad, and my picking out books that I will like score is also not bad. But yeah, when the next book comes out in the Shadow Wizard series, I'll probably look up spoilers. I'll try to find somebody who will tell me spoilers about it, and then use that to decide whether to read it or like how much of it to skip. Because if that one also is not resolved and I have to buy a whole nother book to get a happy ending, I'm not going to buy that book. So did you have any disappointing reads this year, or ones that actually made you angry? Do you have any different opinions about these books, and are there any buzzwords such as dark that tell you right away you're not going to like this book? Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to leave an emoji, how about, are there poinsettias? Either a poinsettia or a cat. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!